think, but you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
I think truth is good for kids. We're so busy lying, we don't even recognize the truth no more in society. We want everybody to feel good. That's not the way life is.
Run into the tunnel. You have to go as fast as you can. You can trust me. It's real. It's real. Full speed, Kevin. Into the wall. The tunnel, I mean.
It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And if it's clear, we shouldn't waste time talking about it. It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear.
Stop!
So, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
One thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease. Now, what we do have evidence for, these plasmids are in there without any question now. This has been replicated in many places around the world, and there are consequences for having these residual pieces of DNA left inside the vaccines.
That doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts, we're trying to figure it out.
that doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts, we're trying to figure it out.
Hey guys, it's ZDoggMD, VP MD, Vinay Prasad, Marty McCary.
3 M's.
3 M's.
Good to see you guys.
Dude, we're the three horsemen of the COVID apocalypse.
Big financial ties. Probably the worst historically was Paul Offit, University of Pennsylvania professor. Listen to this. Big financial ties. Probably the worst historically was Paul Offit, University of Pennsylvania professor. Listen to this.
This episode is brought to you by Rumble Premium, the home of free speech and exclusive content from the voices that matter. With Rumble Premium, you get ad-free viewing, access to exclusive shows, and premium features across the platform. We're talking about Steven Crowder's Mug Club, Tim Pool's Timcast, Russell Brand's Raw Commentary, Redacted News, and this show. Whether it's
Secretary Kennedy and Marty and Jay are operating in a very complicated political landscape, and they just don't have the latitude to act unilaterally.
You know, we have like an 80-year history of giving vaccines by intramuscular injection, and this has never been a problem for any other vaccine, and I just don't see why it would be for these vaccines. You know, we have like an 80-year history of giving vaccines by intramuscular injection, and this has never been a problem for any other vaccine, and I just don't see why it would be.
I think it's true. Amongst the people who we now know well, the people who figured out how to think their way through COVID and found each other and became the movement of COVID dissidents.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It's very good to see you. Coming to you live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, this is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist who doesn't know which slider to move down for the music. Welcome to the show. I started the stream last couple days ago with a set of slides that I didn't explain. I thought they were good enough by themselves that they didn't need an explanation. You can't come in that door, fat dog. Do you want to come in that way? Are you done? You want to come in that way? I guess you can. You can come in this way, I guess, if you have to. Come on, hurry up. Such a dipshitter. God dang, gigantic fat dog. Okay, so I'm trying to succinctly put out there the idea that this is fifth generation warfare. This is the illusion of the pandemic. This is the illusion of Israel and Gaza, the illusion of the EU, the illusion of the pipeline, the illusion of Libya, the illusion of everything that you experience in your adult life as you explore the world that social media offers you. It is completely and totally an illusion of consensus that is sustained by scripted actors on social media. And it is this trap that we must extricate ourselves from. It is of utmost importance that you understand that all of these organizations are the same kind of fifth generation warfare, where the vast majority of their members do not need to understand how this works, do not need to know the existence of the third rails, the existence of the things that they don't talk about, because the illusion that they can sustain together on this script that can be altered, that is provided on a limited basis so that the actors themselves are not in a put in a situation where they even notice that some of their lines might be contradictory to the lines of other actors. And now this can be sustained for a certain length of time, but make no mistake about it, they have now gone far past the sustainable aspect of this illusion. There's too many of us that are potentially going to see through it. And I think one illusion of this fifth generation warfare is finally broken for me, because one of the things that's very hard for me to grasp is how many of these people really know the truth and are just working against me. This is a question that I've had on my mind for actually years now, wondering, are they listening to me? Did they listen to the last thing I said? Why do I have to present to these groups 3 or 4 times? Why isn't it that I haven't started some kind of real, as Alex Zeck likes to say, a real paradigm shift in any of the groups or any of the people that have ever listened to me talk or asked me questions or had my attention? None of them seem to have been effectively, even somebody like Jessica Rose, who declared that my last presentation to Paul was amazing and that it cleared up so many things for her, and she thinks that's actually what happened. Never mind that we don't talk about what she thinks actually might have happened anymore, that Jessica Rose has practically disappeared from the movement as far as I can see. that's the aspect of fifth generation warfare that's starting to break down. It's that they don't have an infinite bench. At some point, it seemed like they did, because again, we didn't understand that they were all on one coordinated script. But now that we do, you can actually see that the bench is only a few people deep. And once you get past that third person, there's nobody for them to effectively hand off to, especially if you're a guy like me and you already worked for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and a bunch of frauds for a year. Then you got handed off to another bunch of frauds at CHD for a half a year. Then you got handed off to another, but see, I've come in contact with too many of the members of these organizations, too many of the members of these groups, and too many members of this free media. It's impossible to explain how I could have been on so many diverse podcasts as, say, Dan Cohen and Uncaptured Media, all the way to Kim Iverson. And still, the seemingly stark contrast between my simple message of RNA cannot pandemic, there's no biology to support this, and anybody with a biological background should be able to see why this is such a monumentally challenging statement to make for somebody who purports to be a professional biologist. It would seem that I've basically exposed my belly by saying RNA can't pandemic, except everyone on Earth has ignored it. Every one of these organizations has ignored it, and we can say the same thing for the much more beautiful and impressive insight that intramuscular injection is just dumb. Unfortunately, that insight turns out to be not mine, and certainly not the first person to come up with this idea. Brandy Vaughn, Tony Bark, shout out to you. Too bad you're not alive to hear that shout out. And so I wanted to start with this because I really want to be clear about what I am suggesting and be clear about what I think I now see. The premise has always been that America is run by a false two-party theater. The problem is that all of the people on social media seem to say that, but then in the end say that we're going to choose a hat anyway. I have a red hat this time, but I used to wear a blue. I used to have blue everything, but now this year I changed to red because Donald Trump is so persuasive. Or the Maha movement and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a hero to me. And so this is an extraordinary place to be as adults, because we are on such shaky ground that for our children, we look like fools. For the younger generations of adults underneath us, we look like fools. And in fact, both sides look like fools to each other is not actually the trap. The trap, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, is that we all look like fools to our children. That's the problem. And if you want to win and you want to get your kids free, you need to understand that so far, very few people have been able to not look like fools. And everyone has bought in still to the idea that you got to wear a red hat or a blue hat, or at least make a decision in November, for goodness sakes. And this is a lie, because if you believe wholeheartedly that the two-party theater that has put Nancy Pelosi in front of us since she was a cheerleader is nothing but a theater, that even that theater was governing us before John F. Kennedy was killed and before Robert F. Kennedy was killed, and governed our interpretation of the events up until the present day. And so even the remarkable sort of synchrony between the, are we going to release the files about this or the files about that, the files of JFK, the files of Epstein, even these theaters are carefully coordinated across platforms and across podcasts, so that this limited spectrum of consensus about what, is really important to talk about, what's really important to argue about, is sustained across the spectrum of red and blue. And yet somehow or another, they have still managed, despite all the mistakes and all of the apparently awakening that has been occurring, we still decide to buy a blue hat or a red hat. And I think that there is a way out if you understand, number one, that anyone that rises into clear view, meaning a sustained level of reach on social media. Whether they know it or not, they are scripted actors. They might be getting tips. They might have a few advisors that they really trust because they've been really good to them. They've given really good advice. They've come through time and time again with the right thing to say and the wrong thing, and making sure not to say the wrong thing. And so these need-to-know basis scripted actors who are working for national governments have a need-to-know basis script. And everything else they just have to trust, like any other actor would. And this aspect of it never really sunk in until this year, because for so long I've been trying to process how it is possible that these people could, in good conscience, ignore a guy like me. I spent hours trying to explain to Brett Weinstein the subtle ridiculousness of calling transfection anything but that, and why transfection in mice and monkeys I already knew wouldn't work, so there's no reason to believe this would. Especially because it doesn't even go very well in mice and monkeys when you're expressing an endogenous protein. Overexpressing an endogenous protein can still cause severe autoimmune reactions in the place where the transfection takes place. And so I knew already from the beginning, and I couldn't understand why it is that these people, despite my being able to break it down to the simplest of ideas, they still couldn't grasp it. And after 5 years of grasping at straws and trying desperately to find somebody that would be willing to understand, it's finally become clear to me that anyone who rose to clear view in the course of the pandemic, by definition, was a need-to-know basis scripted actor. So they couldn't have understood. And if they did understand, they would have gone back to their script provider, and the script provider would have said, no, Jonathan Couey's wrong, or no, it's more important to stick to this. And since you've already gotten previously very proven, pretty good results from listening to me, you're going to stay listening to me. In fact, all I am is an audience member. It's nothing more than their handlers telling these actors in Clearview, you know what, that's just a heckler in the audience. You can ignore him. And then carefully programming their social media so that they never see me again. Now, what you need to start to look for are evidence of this need-to-know basis scripted actors. And I think if you think about some of the recent events, like, for example, the Trump shooting, I think you can come up with examples of where need-to-know basis scripted actors might actually be quite visible. If Donald Trump did not know exactly what was going to go on, but was just told, for example, that if you hear gunshots, make sure that you put your hand on the side of your head and make sure it's the right side of your head. That's what an actor can do. So a need-to-know basis scripted actor would have been told, when you hear gunshots, look where they're coming from and put your hand to your ear and then duck down, and we'll take care of the rest. And so that would very easily explain why a normally improvising son of Donald Trump would have been bragging about his dad's ear getting shot, bragging about the near miss, thanking God about the near miss, showing the scar, or bragging about the intense skill of the surgeon that made it disappear. And yet none of that occurred, and that's probably because the entire Trump family was not aware that that was going to happen. And if they weren't aware it was going to happen, of course, their reaction would be much better. After the event occurs, you can then re-script the brothers not to say anything. You can re-script the brothers to make sure that they don't say anything after the event. And it can be advice like, I think it's better if you don't. There's an investigation going on that's obviously a year and a half later not really happening, but at the time they could have said that. And so the trick is to understand the need-to-know basis part of it, because the need-to-know basis part of it comes along with the signal that you're going to start to be able to find now. And there is such a strong signal. In the last Brett Weinstein podcast, I almost tipped my table over yesterday listening to the introduction of it. So,
insistence, and I think he's right on calling them transfections rather than vaccines.
I think there was just something about that doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out. just like all of you are, and we bring a particular evolutionary toolkit that most people don't have, but we'd love for everyone to have it, and we bring particular experiences that happen to mean that we know stuff about science funding and bats and and such that and public health that the so-called experts probably didn't see coming.
Yep. So
an important thing to understand here, I know I've played that first clip a million times, but in 2022, I think very naively, because I don't think she gets the script, I think Brett gets the script. She just said out loud, in that Signal chat, there's this guy, JJCouey, and we've been listening to him for a while. We've been talking about him behind the scenes, and he insists that we should call this transfection, and I think he's right. And since she's a naive podcaster, she could say that on her podcast, and then her script could come back with don't ever say that stupid shit again. Don't say transfection. And they didn't. And instead, in 2025, she's bragging about knowing about bats and being one of those experts or being one of those dissidents that the experts didn't expect. Now, the reason why this is frightening, ladies and gentlemen, is because in yesterday's podcast, they both freely admit that they did not know what BARDA was. And earlier last month, they watched a video with Scott Gottlieb, and both of them remarked to each other that they didn't know who he was, the former FDA guy and now Pfizer some dude. But the level of sort of vapidness that they can sometimes exhibit if the script has a little hole in it, and of course the script isn't good enough. It was much better in 2021 and 2022 than it is now. In fact, they may be flying blind for quite some time, and that may be why they're starting to really fall apart. But this week was dumbfounding. And particular Heather revealed her. It is hard to quantify how awful her molecular biological background must be for her to have said some of the words that she said in the podcast this week.
Joining us now is somebody who I don't think needs much introduction because many of you love her. You already know her. Whitney Webb is joining us today. She was a staff writer for Mint Press News. She's now a contributing editor for Unlimited Hangout and the author of One Nation Under Blackmail. Whitney Webb, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here again.
Hey, Cam, it's great to be back.
I'm asking you a question, Tony. So I'm showing you this because, again, Kim Iverson is somebody whose show I've done. I've spoken to her about these very basic points, and I've explained them to her. And it seemed to go one in one ear and out the other, and she was broadcasting about something else the next day, and that was just as fascinating as what I had to say the day before. And so these people are very much scripted actors. They have to put out a show every day for Rumble. They have to meet that contract. And so every time a guest comes on, it's all they can do to be dressed and cleaned up and ready to go. I know, because I do this thing all by myself, and to make a stream happen at 10 o'clock every day, 5 days a week, that's a pretty tough thing to push down. You'd have to pay me. I'd have to get, that's hard. I don't have a staff. I don't have an editor. I don't have a person tweeting for me. My wife just got back, so she will start to email people when I know that I'm going to stream. But that's very difficult if you're actually making something, creating something, and not getting handed a script that you read. But all of these people on that basis is how you should think of them. Now, I have in the basis on the bottom of the screen here that Whitney Webb attended the first CHD conference in Knoxville 2022, Knoxville, Tennessee, that is, with Malone, Ryan Cole, Pierre Corey, Charles Rixey, Matt Crawford, and myself, and Mark Kulak was there. Mark Kulak and I rented a car and shared that car and a hotel room from the airport and back. Because Knoxville is not as close to wherever we flew in, and I would have to think hard about where did we fly into Nashville. So you fly into Nashville, you drive to Knoxville. So I met Whitney Webb there. I have a selfie with her, and after the conference, she sent me 2 copies of her 2 books with signatures inside. This one says, and you can see that here, to Jonathan, it was great to meet you at the CHD conference. Thanks for your support. Unfortunately, Mike decided that this wasn't a book that he liked, so this was the book that he pulled off the shelf and started chewing on the other day. But he didn't ruin this signature, so I'm very happy about that. So Whitney Webb, quite frankly, I think has to be a scripted actor. It doesn't mean that what she's scripted to say is wrong. It just means that it's limited. And it just means that what it doesn't say is probably really important, and what it repeats is probably not. And so instead of, having a journalistic bent of her own, like Kim Iverson, not just going into it fawning over Whitney Webb. Of course, she goes into it fawning over Whitney Webb.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I mean, I think you are one of my favorites. You are brilliant. Your research is phenomenal. So let's talk about the latest scandal that involved you before we get into the scandals that involve Epstein and Trump and Clintons and PayPal Mafia. Maybe we'll get into that. But recently, Tucker Carlson had Daryl Cooper on his show, and Daryl Cooper was talking about Epstein. And during the conversation, he had mentioned that some of the research that had been done for Epstein on the Epstein saga was done by Mike Benz and by Ryan Dawson, saying that Ryan was one of the chief researchers. And he said, Ryan Dawson, one of the chief researchers, people who write books about the nation being under blackmail crib this guy's research. Clearly referring to you.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard this, and I've had Ryan on my show.
No, again, what I'm trying to impress upon you is that it doesn't mean that Whitney doesn't know. It just means that Whitney thinks she's doing good. It means that Whitney has trusted advisors that have earned her trust, and she's successful in the things that she's published. The tips that she gets are successfully executed. But I have no doubt in my mind that somebody checks what she writes before she publishes it and is allowed to, by her, to eliminate anything they want to. Absolutely, positively, 100%. And then let's go on further to say that this woman has been everywhere, from some left-leaning programs to some very right-leaning places like Glenn Beck. This is not by accident, again, because anybody that rises into this clear a view cannot be an accident, because otherwise the military weapon that is social media would not even be used on you. It's not even being used then. The foundation of how social media is weaponized is that the naive users, the skilled social media users, believe that their activity impinges on their ability to reach other people, when in reality their ability to reach other people is exactly zero, the same as everyone else's. And in fact, only people who are able to reach significant numbers of people are scripted. And they don't have to know they're scripted in a malevolent way. They just have to know, I know I'm scripted, but I get to say what I want most of the time, is kind of probably how this works. And the dumber, the more naive people are, the less, polymath-like background they have, the better. And so I'm still dumbfounded. I still find myself absolutely lost, and I can't understand why any of these people after 6 years will not talk about how a background signal, a genetic one, a background signal, an actuarial one, like the population pyramid, those two things could be combined to create an illusion. And I'm so shocked that is so hard to get out there, except, of course, that social media is designed for it not to. I can't. Not without individual people deciding to put their foot down and do it. Download the PeerTube app. Start getting your friends to download the PeerTube app. Download videos and post them places, because otherwise it will not happen. My channel will always be invisible. My Twitter will always be invisible. The only thing that has a possibility of, by a pure grassroots action of going somewhere, is sharing PeerTube. So they won't define PCR and how it is that we use it so successfully in academia and used it so fraudulently during COVID. No one will do it. No one will say that these are just old, already named technologies that were renamed as gene therapies and called countermeasures so that they could reset the IP on some of these processes. But this is all an illusion, because even in the most pure form, like we could find in academia, it would not be a useful product to augment the health of a human. And so it's very curious right now that we have a situation where the Health and Human Services Secretary over there blinking is in a position where apparently he has canceled a bunch of BARDA contracts for future mRNA vaccines that are for respiratory viruses. And our friend Brett Weinstein thinks it's a very significant development in a long, 4D chess battle that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been playing for the last 20 years that's included 30 minutes of prayer on his knees every day and includes Donald Trump being the answer to those 20 years of prayer. Which is fine. Brett Weinstein's not going to question his really good friend from childhood. And so they're not going to tell you that transformation and transfection are also the technologies, the old technologies that allow RNA virology to even exist. Because if they had to grow these viruses and grow these RNAs from whatever they find in nature, then RNA virology wouldn't even exist. And so the obvious truth that RNA cannot pandemic, nobody's bothered to try and touch it because it's true. Because it's such a wonderful combination of 3 words that they all just have to turn around and walk away. And it's not that dissimilar to this combination of 4 words, intramuscular injection is dumb. I've got a pretty good take. Overall, I got a pretty good take on things. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jonathan Couey. I come to you live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my family needs your help. We need support. Please go to GigaOhmBiological.com and find a way to support the stream. Will I produce content that you can download? I do already. Will I produce PDFs that you can share? Hopefully soon. But at this point, you've got to understand that there's no one else real on the internet. So what are you paying for with Netflix and Paramount Plus and HBO Max and Prime Video? I'm asking $10 a month. And with $10 a month at GigaOhmBiological.com, you will be supporting something that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. It is a father of 5 trying to break the spell that America is under and maybe derail this train to nowhere. America is under attack by a bunch of scripted actors. And it's been a really long road getting here, understanding that these people are that way. And unfortunately, I don't know very many other people like me. I don't know very many other people like me who have seen it, and seen it again, and seen it again, and kept fighting, and stayed in it, and kept giving the benefit of the doubt every time somebody smashed me. And I'm still here. I'm not going away. I'm not going away, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it? Game time! Woo!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Every once in a while, I feel like I got to start the show with an intro. I don't know. It gets me going. It gets my mind focused. And a lot of times, that's actually what stops me from streaming is I don't have the intro quite right. So you got to forgive me. It's just a really, it's difficult to put myself out here every day. It's not that I don't occasionally enjoy it. I love teaching, but this material is not the pleasant wave that you see here, but it is a wave of filth. It is a wave of lies. It is a wave of liars, and liars are not nice people to be around, especially if you trust them with your family's future. And so these frauds, it might seem lighthearted to say that they are on Bob Malone's dumb script, but from my family's perspective, these people are some of the most treacherous people on earth. And they are coordinated lies told by coordinated liars who all trust the script, which is what any good actor does. And so these guys, I've met two of them in person multiple times. I've explained this shit multiple times in person to these two guys. The short one over there on the left from the UK and Egypt, I have no idea, but I'm sure he's a mega fraud. You're not going to change their script because they were put in place as part of a national security operation to make sure that transfection would be effectively protected from any blame at all. The ghost of health freedom is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He thought being the health freedom guy would get him to the White House, and he's wrong. It got him close, and now he is just the tool he's always been. Do not take the bait on social media, ladies and gentlemen. You got to love your neighbor. You got to know who they are again, because the ghost of health freedom is still what everybody's chasing, and it is a ghost. The real ghosts of health freedom are actually Tony Bark and Brandy Vaughn, who were murdered in 2020 and replaced with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Mary Holland, Meryl Nass, Judy Mikovits, Brian Hooker, and all these other people. Del Bigtree, it's just a joke to me now. It's very easy to see it. Why would there be a health freedom movement that's fake in America? Well, that's because intramuscular injection is a dumb idea from the late 1800s, and autism, spectrum disorder, pandemics, and gain of function are mythologies used to hide that. That's the reality. And these are the people that I think are personally I think are responsible for it, especially with regard to the kind of brick walls made of scripted liars that I ran into. And
you can tell if someone's lying. You know,
I
you can
think
sort of
every
feel
one
it
of these
in
people is in trouble. I really do. I think we are being governed by podcast. For some reason, my escape key isn't working anymore. It's a strange situation, but only for removing the slideshow.
It's actually JJCouey.
And so it's, we got to get off social media. You got to get off social media. More importantly, you got to get your kids off. That's really the trick. I can't stress enough how I think that the truth is really this simple. Intramuscular injection as medicine is a dumb idea from the late 1800s. I promise in the next couple days, I am going to upload the PDF of this book, which is called Hypodermic Injections by A. Ruppiner. And I'm going to read it to you out loud. And you will see that hypodermic injection and hypodermic needles in the late 1800s were thought to be the best and most important invention in medical history. And books were written in the late 1800s. This is a book from the late 1800s, which expounded on the great and versatile advantages that the new invention of hypodermic needle gave doctors at the time and promised to give them in the future to come. And I think that this is actually the foundation of where we are now. And all of these, maybe many or all of these vaccinologists believe that we have acknowledged these shortcomings in the past in the same way that we are apparently acknowledging the shortcomings now. Maybe it's the aluminum, maybe it's the mercury, maybe it was the whale fat, maybe it was the wool oil, maybe it was the sperm oil that we put in there, or maybe it was the fact that we were using too big of a needle or too high of a concentration or not dilutive enough a concentration. Maybe we should have used oil instead of sterile saline. And so this was a long process through which no one, it seemed, or very few doctors that rose into clear view were able to succinctly say that maybe the reason why this isn't working all the time as claimed is because intramuscular injection is actually dumb. The times that it works, you might not have even hit the muscle. The time that it hurt people, it might have gotten farther. None of these things were considered because the hypodermic needle and injection at the time of the late 1800s, early 1900s was considered a flawless advance in medicine that had almost limitless possibilities. It was a matter of just imagining a smart combination of substances within which or to put inside of it. Now, I just wanted to share a couple other things with you. I have to turn this page just so I can do this for you. Check this out. This is a little item from the early 1900s. It says PGH Physicians Supply Company, Pittsburgh without an H. And so this is a kind of case that a doctor would carry around the time of World War I. And so I suspect they were made in very mass quantities. You can see similar boxes, which are printed with a wide variety of companies, and everywhere from Montreal, Canada, to Philadelphia and Boston and this kind of thing. And this one just happens to be from Pittsburgh. That's where I'm from. And I think it's cool because you don't have doctors with something like this now. You don't even think of doctors having this. But remember, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, this was such a ubiquitously accepted idea. What is this? This is a hypodermic needle kit. And what's cool about it is, and this is something that, of course, Mark Husatonic, Mark Kulak of Mark Husatonic ITS has told you before, there might be one hypodermic needle for an entire small town, only owned and cleaned by the same doctor. And so this hypodermic needle has little CC gradations on it so that you can do some kind of volumetric calculations. In the box, you have 2 separate needles. And so it's not a new needle for every dude. And in fact, it's hard to really imagine if you, for example, let's look here. What is this little red thing? Oh, cool. It's got morphine and atropine and little tiny pills there that you can, of course, dilute in water and then put and take it up in the needle. This container also comes out, I presume, so that you could autoclave it or boil it or something like that and sustain it. So again, the other evidence that you can see in this little item, of course, is that there are other containers here that have other designations on top. So this needle and its associated hypodermic syringe would be carried around and used multiple times to inject multiple different things into multiple different people. And it was a really handy little thing. Very solid little piece of steel box with an insert that could be removed, and a very finely made syringe that could be used over and over again. This is actually a screw off top here, see, so you can you screw the needle on. And so screwing the needle on even implies a little bit of handling of this area, right? Look, my fingers are there. And then we're going to take this needle out. Well, watch carefully, you don't poke yourself, doughhead. And then put that needle on. And so there's a lot of handling of this little thing. And then, oh, doctor, I feel so much better. Oh, I'm glad. I'll just wipe this off on my thing and put it back here. And then I got another visit. I got to get on my horse and ride down the street to the next person that I'm taking care of. So let me wipe this off on my shirt over here and get out of here. Thanks a lot. Do you have any hot water I could rinse this with? So there's an interesting, pattern here, because if you look, they even made silver boxes and put the doctor's name on it, and they could hold more than one syringe. But the syringes that they were given out in the early 1900s are almost always exactly the same. Unfortunately, these 2 syringes have they've kind of salted shut or something. I haven't put them in any kind of solvent yet to try and see if I can release them, but they're bound up. But they have a very similar thing, except they have a different handle here. But I presume this plunger moves, but it's just so weak and whatever. So these are cool because you can see the container opens up, and so this is also for cleaning, for autoclaving, for boiling, putting in a pressure cooker, whatever. So probably the coolest one that I got is this one, and it's from the Pasteur Company Limited in Paris. I got this one from some dude in Wisconsin who, I don't know if he knew what he had, but this is crazy. Okay, this is a leather case. I understand that it's embossed, so that should tell us some time, like early 1900s, I think. I don't think it's 1800s, but look at this time machine shit. So this one comes with a little leather fold out. So this one has a whopping 6 needles available to it. And each needle, these are freaking thick, first of all. Look at the thickness of that needle. And then each needle came with a little thing. Look, because sometimes you get some shit in there, so you want to clean that out before you use it in the next person. And so each one of these needles has its own separate little needle pusher. And this syringe is quite large. You can see it's got a glass center and it's a red thing. It's also got the same gradations as the smaller one did for CCs. And here on the side, it says Pasteur vaccine in Paris. And then here it says patent August 26th, 1880. Sorry, I can't see that because I am old. And it's actually really small. 1885, I believe, if you look at it there. 1885. See that? So that's pretty cool. And so in this box, there's also, look, they have the extra. This is just crazy time machine shit. I love this stuff. Yeah, you could do an enema with it. It's 10 cc's. It's a lot of, look at extra washers. Are you kidding me? So this thing is really cool. When it got here, I thought this can't be real, but it is. It looks real. It definitely feels real. There's no reason for me to believe that this is fake. It just might be one that was old stock. It's crazy. So what I'm trying to stress to you is that there is ample evidence out there which suggests that intramuscular injection is just an idea that everybody got really excited about around the time when vaccination was variolation, where you just scraped people up with an ivory needle and you inoculated to smallpox. And actually in this book, the first applications for hypodermic injections are not communicable diseases. And that's what I find so fascinating about this book. And what you will see then, of course, and what this thing from Pittsburgh should tell you, is that actually intramuscular injection became widely accepted because morphine use became widely accepted in the late 1800s, early 1900s in America. And I suspect, and Mark suspects, that a lot of people were just using morphine because it's good. So anyway, that's where we are. We have a lot of work to do, but I do think we're making some serious progress, although most of my progress right now is buying things on eBay, which make me feel less crazy. But these 3 items that I acquired over the last week have made me feel much less crazy about the idea that intramuscular injection might be an idea gone horribly wrong, that intramuscular injection of morphine might work, but it might not work so well as a way to augment the immune system, even if it was less painful than variolating for smallpox, even if it was useful for some things in this book. It's an extraordinary place where we are. I don't think anyone has gotten this far. I really don't. I don't want to be a creep, but I want you to find somebody else who will tell you that all the people in this are either witting or unwitting traitors. Everybody circled in red is most likely a scripted traitor that accepted their acting role years and years ago, and that includes these people up here. That's Paul Thomas. That is Suzanne Humphreys. That is James Lyons Weiler. This is Mary Holland. That is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current HHS Secretary in America. Anyone who's outside of America, please don't misunderstand. I used to work for him. I used to work for them. And I doubt that any of these people are good guys. Most of them must work for some kind of paramilitary organization or the military directly. That's the only way I can really explain it. I don't think she worked for the military. That's about all I can say for sure. So it was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was orchestratedly used to... we manage this problem. And Kevin McKernan is saying it right now. But he's not saying it as accurately as we've said it for almost 5 years now. And certainly for the last 3. And certainly he's not including the opioid epidemic as a way of reducing the life expectancy of COVID that killing old people to manage Social Security would not have done. And that's really crucial, right? Because there are a couple signals that are being regularly blamed on COVID that if there was no novel virus, but there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was exacerbated by very specific manipulations, including letting opioid deaths run wild and including telling everybody that it would be inappropriate to use antibiotics for a viral pneumonia. Those 2 tweaks alone might be enough to produce a signal that somebody like Kevin McKernan could consistently convert to COVID in any podcast he went on to by simply sticking to the stupid narrative of Robert Malone. And that's what this script is all about. Even look how long I've been at this. Somebody was stapling my website to the truckers signs in Canada. And I didn't get anywhere. But Viva Fry is one of the most popular podcasts on earth now. And that's just by design. It's been a long, strange trip coming to understand this for what it is. That these people were provided a script, and that's why they stick to it. That's what any good actor does. And so Brett Weinstein has told us
radically different. In one of them, the country got a new president and moved on and healed. And it doesn't mean that we are restored to what we were, but at least we know what world we live in. We live in a democracy, and things ebb and flow between our two parties, etc., etc. On the other hand, if 1963 was a coup, if somebody took out President Kennedy and
so his idea is that when President Kennedy was taken out, then a new kind of government took over, and we've been under their governance ever since. And I think that's wrong. I think that whoever controlled our democracy before Kennedy had a brief problem with Kennedy and eliminated him and his brother. I think it's been a very steady governance by a group of coordinated, scripted liars for a very, very long time. And perhaps the Kennedy boys were not willing to accept the script, but I assure you they were offered the script. And so he's suggesting that right now what we have to worry about is that AI on social media is going to make it hard for you to tell the difference between him and his wife, who are real podcasters, and an AI representation of them. And so in a year or less, Sabine Hassenfeller and this group of this husband and wife believe that AI is going to be sufficiently sophisticated so that they won't be able to tell whether it's a real animal behavior video or a fake one, and you won't be able to tell the difference between their real podcast and one that is fake. And so the illusion here, the 5th generation warfare illusion, is that these people know what they're talking about. And that illusion can be broken if you see the script. And how would you see the script? This is hard. I know a lot of people can't follow me. I'm going too far here. But how would you be able to see that these people are on a script? You'd be able to see they were on a script because they would admit not knowing things that you couldn't not know if you had gotten here by yourself. In other words, let me just see if I can do this correctly. Let me just see. In other words, oh, come on, man. What did I push the wrong fade? Dummy. Just imagine the scenario where just imagine a scenario where somebody that you know, some random person we're talking about here, Heather Hang, decides that she's going to become an expert in curries. You hear that? Not Steph Curry, but curry like the food. And I have 2 sort of models in my head about how one would do this. And I guess I'm going to use the one that I used this morning over coffee with my wife. We have this friend, a wonderful friend in Norway, and his first name is Tur, and that's T-O-R, but you say Norwegian, you say Tur. And Tur is one of the smartest, cleverest, funniest, most mentally, what is the right word? Organized? He's like a little Doogie Howser. Him and his wife are both really, really smart kids. And as really, really smart, focused kids, they got far in neuroscience. And Tur, when I visited him while they were in Portugal for their postdocs, cooked me and a few other colleagues a Indian dinner. And if I was to briefly, I'm not a weatherman. It would have been a table about, let me get down. I mean, it would have been a huge table, right? There were like 5 people sitting around a round table in a very tiny apartment in Portugal. And the round table had leaves in it, you know, so it was pulled out wide, and there were like 5 of us sitting there, and one of them was a very old professor, respected around the world. So it was a semi-formal thing, but we'd all work together, so it wasn't really. We were swearing and stuff and drinking. But, you know, there was certain things you wouldn't talk about with that guy around. But nevertheless, we sat down, and he starts explaining all the things that he made. And I don't know Indian food except for what I learned from tour. And it was in this one meal where he like made the ghee himself, which I think is this enriched butter. And he did all the, I mean, he showed us his pantry, and it's all just, you know, raw ingredients and powders and stuff. And then he produced this extremely authentic Indian meal. And Tour would never tell you that he's an expert in Indian food. He would humble himself to the point where when I said, like, this is not, you did not make this food. This is something you ordered, and then you put it in your own dishes, and you're messing with me. And I said that about 3 times during the dinner while you got to try this one, man. I worked really hard on this one. It took me a long time to get it right. And then I can think of somebody like Heather Hang, who, when she became interested in curries, would have bought an Instant Pot and bought an Instant Pot cooking book and made a curry, you know, like, I don't know, or a dish like beef Kerala. And then after making that dish, she would have said on a podcast something like, you know, if you're not familiar with it, Indian curry is really good. And I've had some experience making Indian curry. I have a couple books that I've read, and, you know, I've explored the various aspects of these various flavors, but overall it's just really overwhelming how kind of contrast this is to American food. And so I just find myself really overwhelmed. It was kind of like a paradigm shift. And ever since then, I've been really interested in curries. And so I've been doing some Googling, and I bought some ingredients, and so I think I'm going to make another one really soon. And so my friend, the scientist, spent months and months and bought books and bought all the raw ingredients and screwed it up a lot and told stories about ruining a whole batch of this or a whole batch of that, and why aren't you eating more, and would take no compliments, would offer no advice, wouldn't say, you know, what did you try? And just an amazing guy with an amazing level of an immersion in anything that he does. He wouldn't become a birder, for example, because he would have to learn way too much and would drive him bananas before he would feel comfortable calling himself a birder. So Tur is one of these guys who doesn't pick up a new hobby lightly. But these assholes, these scripted actors, on the internet will pick up any expertise they are scripted to pick up. And that's how I see them now. And if you watch their latest podcast with me, you will see the same thing. You really will. So I think this is it, right?
Canceling these contracts.
And consulting top vaccines don't
substance.
So I'm just gonna escape for just 1 second because I can see that I didn't queue it up to start at the right part of the video. So it'll just take me 2 seconds to fix this slide. Playback, trim, and then just advance a little bit right there. Okay, slideshow, here we go. Thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tolerating my
Are we going to be talking about excrement today?
We are going to be talking about certain friends of ours who are rolling the excrement off stage.
Oh, nice.
And to that point, let us run this clip of a friend of ours, Bobby Kennedy, talking about the changes that are afoot at HHS.
Now, I just want to recall things when I recall them, and I know that some people in the chat have said that when you recall things, you should just spit it out. So I'm just going to spit this one out. In 2022, in February of 2023, this one's pretty big. In February of 2023, when I was still working for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I should make myself bigger here because this is pretty big. This is a pretty big deal. In February of 2023, when I was still working for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as an advisor and scientific consultant on the book, The Wuhan Cover-Up, Brett Weinstein released a Dark Horse podcast from November of 2021 with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and himself. So a podcast that was recorded in November of 2021 was held in the archive until February of 2023. And at that time, I had already thrown Brett out of my trust circle because he said that spending a half an hour with me on Zoom would probably be pointless. He can't really learn any more from me. And then I got hired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he was surprised by that. And then finally, I just forgot, leave it, forget it. I'm working for Bobby. And I believed in Bobby. I believed in Bobby so much that when Mark Kulak had figured out that Brett and Eric Weinstein's dad was actually the first intellectual property lawyer in the Department of Justice, and that he was appointed to the Department of Justice by John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, meaning that he worked with Bobby's dad. The first thing that crossed my mind, and I know it's going to sound crazy, is that Brett's lying to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Maybe Bobby doesn't even know that he didn't release the podcast in November of 2021, but he's only releasing it right now to try and jump on the coattails of the soon-to-be presidential candidate. And so I sent Bobby an email when I saw this podcast explaining to him that it was actually crazy. You know, your dads work together. I wonder if you know that, because if you don't know that, that means that Brett might be working against you. He might be lying to you, and that's why that he didn't release the podcast. And Bobby Kennedy responded to that email with a thank you. And they went on to do the Rescue the Republic, where they call each other old friends. And so it was recorded in November of 2021 and released exactly when they decided to release it. And it was a coordinated one. Save it until I'm about ready to run for president. Save it until after the murder stops. And so here he is referring to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as his friend, and now they're going to talk about how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has made an announcement that they're going to end a BARDA program worth of $500 million that's developing new respiratory virus vaccines on the mRNA platform. It's a really extraordinary video, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, relative to mRNA platform vaccines.
Hi, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA.
Sorry, I don't know why I still have this there. What I should have on the bottom here is Brett was in a Signal chat with me until 2022. And I worked for RFK until 2023 and CHD until 2024. And so this is that's what's going on here. Is that not going to work now? You demon. Okay, let me see if I can reset this. Sorry about that.
Are we going to be talking about excrement today?
We are going to be talking about certain friends of ours who are rolling the excrement off stage.
Oh, nice.
And to that point, let us run this clip of a friend of ours, Bobby Kennedy, talking about the changes that are afoot at HHS relative to mRNA platform vaccines.
Hi, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA drives some of our most advanced scientific research.
And what is this, Witnet? What am I doing here? There we go. I guess that's okay. That's super annoying. I apologize. This is not a very well done slide deck, apparently.
It funds developments of vaccines, drugs, diagnostics, and other tools to fight emerging diseases and national health threats. Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us,
if most of the shots in development were for flu and COVID, then you could just see this as shots that they didn't need in the first place. This was an absolutely pro forma cancellation. It would be like, we ordered a bunch of spare tires for next year because we're anticipating a lot of flat tires in America. So we ordered a bunch of tires, but now I guess we decided to cancel those orders because we don't expect as many flat tires as we thought. It's really that inconsequential. It doesn't matter at all if the original COVID vaccine is going to stay there. The original flu versions are going to stay there. We're just not going to develop any more. We're just going to get rid of some of the superfluous ones,
mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract.
Of course, the enchantment there is if they don't perform well against viruses of the upper respiratory tract, maybe they perform well for other viruses.
Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation and the vaccine becomes ineffective.
Now, the funny part is that this is the script they tried to get me to sell at the end of 2020 by using Piper Stover and Geert van den Bosch and a guy by the name of Luigi Warren. Luigi Warren sent me a paper about Merrick's disease and hinted that this might be what happens with the transfection, and I wrote a review about it. A review about how transfecting to a single protein might result in increasing the speed of evolution of that protein, and we could, get escape variants and all this other shit, which Geert van den Bosch is still predicting for the future. And of course, I saw through that by about May of 2021, and certainly the reason why all these people contacted me at the end of 2020, Piper Stover, Brett Weinstein, Geert van den Bosch, and Luigi Warren of Drastic to get me on this shtick was because this is the national security narrative. This is the theater that they needed people to enthusiastically participate in. So anybody that's willing to pick up a costume and put it on, by all means. Especially if you're a guy who works at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, you think you're throwing away your career, maybe we got a real live one on the line here.
This dynamic drives a phenomenon called antigenic shift, meaning that the vaccine paradoxically encourages new mutations and can actually prolong pandemics as the virus constantly mutates to it.
And now remember, of course, the argument that occurred in 2020 and 2021, which ultimately won in my mind back when I was still fighting for the good guys or the bad guys and thinking that the bad guys were on TV and the good guys were part of CHD. The argument is that when we make natural immunity, we don't make immunity just to the spike protein. We also make immunity to highly conserved proteins like the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. And I've spent a year and a half teaching that kind of immunology, that we make a broad memory to something. And so in doing so, I was effectively not denying the existence of the novel virus, just saying that our previous immunity overlapped with it. And so again, that is the theater that the part of the part of the script that Mike Eden was involved in seeding. So between Mike Eden and Ryan Cole, we had two very strong arguers for natural immunity and its overlap, but also two guys that were very accepting of the novel virus. In Drastic, we had a guy by the name of Luigi Warren, who was financially connected to the mRNAs, telling me that here's a paper of Merrick's disease, and at the same time, Geert van den Bosch covered Merrick's disease, so I thought, holy shit, I'm on top of this. I'm ahead of them. That's how they get you. And the trick is to see that you're surrounded by people with a script that's better than yours, because you're trying to assemble yours and theirs is provided.
Escape the protective effects of the vaccine. Millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because of...
So the Omicron variant was the first example of an escape, and they told us it had like 30 mutations in the spike protein in particular. However, none of these people bothered to say whether those 30 mutations were in the fear and cleavage site, whether those 30 mutations fell inside of the part which was highly homologous to staphylotoxin and enterotoxin B, Staphylococcus enterotoxin B. And certainly nobody talked about whether these 32 mutations in the spike protein were consequential for the HIV inserts, which were identified by a couple of Indian doctors early in the pandemic and then censored away. It also didn't really talk about whether or not the highly racially specific aspect of the virus was mutated at all by the 32 changes in the Omicron spike. But Matt Crawford had a really good story about where Omicron came from, and he tried to say that it was his idea, what I was saying, which is that this is just a background that they're exaggerating, and they knew that Omicron was back there, and they just decided when to say they found it. And he tried to make it into some other bullshit story, like the same thing that he did to the DMED story. Again, just a scripted clown on the internet that's associated directly with Robert Malone from 2020, Matt Crawford of Rounding the Earth.
Single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. The same risk applies to flu. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses...
Who is HHS, and how are they determining that mRNA poses some danger or lack of... You see, he's talking like a podcaster. He's talking like Chuck E. Cheese, because it's not him that's making the decision, it's HHS, whoever the hell they are, even though he's the director.
More risks and benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA for respiratory viruses and investing in better solutions. Thank you.
Now, what you need to understand, what I see first, is that what I think is happening is that they are suggesting to us that we should fight for mRNA. Just like people fought for Twitter as being a free space place, what they are going to do on the other side is drive people bananas with hate and anger and frustration about this issue. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be sworn at by Colbert on The Late Show. Like sworn at, like F you, they're going to bleep it out. And that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to kill people. And Paul Offit and Vincent Raccaniello are going to tell people that we're going to kill people by doing this, that the mRNA saved millions of lives during the pandemic, and they're throwing away this technology. And by the end of the Trump administration, they'll have us so frustrated about it that when the next administration comes in and it's a Democrat and they reinstate this investment in mRNA technology, we'll all go, thank goodness, as part of the reversing of all of the almost destroyed America thing. And the people that will keep us trapped in this bullshit narrative are these real monkeys here.
All right. I must say, sometimes he puts out these announcements and they have a kind of after-school special public service announcement kind of a character to them. It's growing on me. I'm liking them better and better. I will also say, just in a general sense, I believe that when Kennedy leaves office, he is sure to write a book that explains to us everything that we've lived through as he's navigating behind the scenes some set of obstacles that we can't understand. So I find this clip fascinating. It gives us a window into what he's doing, and then it gives us a rationale under which he's doing it, which, while correct, I don't think is a fraction of what there actually is to say here. He's given us a chunk that allows us to see this coherently, but it's the tip of the iceberg with respect to why HHS would be canceling these contracts. I also wanted to use this to look back at the pandemic, which, among other things, was a tremendously powerful educational environment for many of us, you and me especially, where we walked into it assuming that the narrative we were being handed was basically correct, and we left.
It's almost like he said it right there. The narrative we were being handed. He just got handed a slightly different narrative, slightly ahead of the other narrative, and so therefore he feels like he's ahead of things.
Left it 4 or 5 years later, feeling that actually we'd been misled across almost all of the topics that were involved, and all of the knowledge that allowed us to see the ways in which we'd been misled was, painfully hard won.
Reginald, he's never going to get to the point. He's never going to tell you what the knowledge that was hard won and what it got him. He's not going to tell you that I learned A, B, and C and therefore concluded X, Y, and Z. Not once. Not once in 6 years.
And so anyway, I think we now have a better vantage point, and this, in fact, is a data point that allows us to look at some of the things that we concluded during the pandemic and to evaluate them. Did you have something you wanted to?
Why don't you go on first?
Okay, so what he has said here is that HHS has a sub-entity, BARDA, which, to be honest with you, I had not heard of.
All right.
That has these 22 mRNA platforms.
They had not heard of BARDA. This is admission that you are a scripted person. This is as absurd as pretending that Robert Malone didn't know what the WEF was when Meryl Nass and Mary Holland went to his farm in 2020 to vet him and found this kind of semi-retired horse guy who didn't know very much about what was going on. He didn't know what BARDA was. Either means he is on a terribly shitty script, or he's just simply a very naive idiot. A very naive, rich guy from a rich family, a connected family that was put in place in 2017 with a fake drama about being canceled at a college, settled for $500,000, which facilitated him starting a podcast and becoming a podcaster just in time to play a role in the rise of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his childhood friend, to possibly the White House. He is a scripted actor. And he's so scripted and doing so little research on his own, and she is doing so little research on her own, that in August of 2025, they are freely admitting, without a bit of irony or any shame, gee, I didn't know anything about this BARDA thing. That's strange. I wonder why I didn't know anything about BARDA. Because you didn't do any of your own frickin' research. Because you didn't teach yourself anything or select any of the reading yourself, you scripted actors.
Contracts that it is now in the process of canceling. The rationale for doing so is that the mRNA platform, he says, is paradoxical. What is said here is that HHS has a sub-entity, BARDA, which, to be honest with you, I had not heard of.
All right.
That has these 22 mRNA platform contracts that it is now in the process of canceling. The rationale for doing so is that the mRNA platform, he says, is paradoxical with respect to its impact on the diseases it is designed to control. And his explanation is that the mRNA platform is narrowly targeted. This is something that you and I realized early in the pandemic, at least about the particular mRNA vaccine or vaccines that were being deployed. And it was a major reason to be skeptical of their capacity to control the spread of the virus.
Now, it would be most honest for him to say that he and Chris Martenson and Alexandros Marinos, one of the shittiest people on the internet, and his wife and a couple other people, one Jumi Kim, were in this Signal chat with me. Matt Crawford was also in that Signal chat with Brett Weinstein, where I explained that this is just an old technology called transfection, or with the adenovirus transformation, and that this technology could be relied upon to induce autoimmunity. And I explained how MHC, the molecule presenting molecule, the platform that every cell in your body interacts with the immune system based on, that molecule would be involved, and that cytotoxic T cells would be involved, and that potentially cytotoxic T cells that were responding to antibody labeling of the produced protein could also be involved, but that would be the second exposure to it. They understood all of that at the end of 2020, in the middle of 2021, or even the end of 2020. Because I spent time explaining it to them, because I was put into a Signal chat with them by Piper Stover. And I'm accusing all of these people of being national security scripted state actors on a need-to-know basis that were meddling with my family's ability to make a living for really 6 years. And I have a very detailed list of them, a very detailed calendar of them, a very detailed list of what they did, what they said, when they texted, what they sent. And the only conclusion that any rational person would come to when faced with this timeline of 6 years of meddling and contradiction is that these people are scripted actors. And somehow or another, I came in contact with so many of them that through my eyes, it is now very easy to see that they are scripted actors. It is impossible for a grassroots, real person who really has the expertise that these two people claim to have could not know what BARDA was. It's impossible unless they were scripted and don't know very much at all. And I think you can hear it as they go on.
In particular, Geert Vanden Bossche called attention to the tendency that a narrowly targeted vaccine, really his point was any vaccine that you deliver into an active pandemic is likely to...
Don't forget that Geert Vanden Bossche, Matthias Desmet, and Robert Malone made a video on horseback in 2022 in the mountains of Spain. And if you didn't see it, it's because it's an international hoax. It's an international theater with international actors that range as far wide as Claire Craig and Jonathan Engler to Jessica Hockett and Pierre Corey, all the way to Nick Hudson and JikiLeaks.
Caused the evolution of mutants because effectively you have a lot of people in an intermediate stage of developing immunity, and that means that effectively it is a gain-of-function experiment from the point of view of the virus. And so to the extent that you're creating, you got lots of people who are 3 days out from their vaccination who get the virus, then the point is the virus has a weakened immunity with which to learn the loopholes.
So this was exactly the point I was going to make, that Kennedy's point about the mRNA.
So there's a weakened immunity produced by the transfection, which I don't understand what he means by that, because again, he's not making it a very simple and direct biological analysis, but he's talking in kind of vague terms, and that is the sign of a scripted actor. They don't give you useful information. And if there's anyone on the internet who's unable to give useful information, it's these two characters.
Platform in particular, tending to create mutants that can prolong a pandemic, while I believe true, is also true more generally. as per Geert Vanden Bosch's, observations, predictions.
He's absolutely mixing in improv. That's what makes this thing work. And I can't stress enough how important it is that's why I'm getting it so right. They are scripted, but improvising. And that, from a rudimentary high school performer, might not make any sense. But if you've been on stage, and if you know what acting is at all, or if you worked at an acting school like I did with acting high school kids and watched them do plays and talk to their teachers about it, you understand that the lines are the lines, but sometimes the lines don't come out quite right because you're so in the moment, but it's actually better. Sometimes when you were supposed to run across the stage and you fall, it's actually better. And so the scripted but improvised part of it is what makes Rogan so good. And what all of these people are trying to emulate. Wow, that's so neat, yo.
From early in COVID, in which he said, what I'm saying should not be considered strange or surprising. This is something that vaccinologists and public health people have long known.
Yeah, and it was surprising. It was one of these cases where...
Again, remember, somebody financially connected to the mRNA named Luigi Warren, one of the primary members of the original Drastics, sent me the Marek's disease paper in chickens and suggested that this was probably the way that I could cover this idea, and I ran with it. I was so excited, and I actually think that if you were to look back, I beat Geert Vanden Bosch to the punch on Marek's disease, and then he covered it after me. And at that time, I thought, holy shit, Luigi Warren, my buddy in Drastic, really hooked me up. And I was arguing with people in the hallway at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine about how hooked up I was. You hadn't read this Marek's disease paper. What do you know? It was amazing what they did.
There's a group of experts who, in theory, should all know the same thing, who are confronted with obvious illogic and are remaining mum, which is indicative of something else. It's indicative of a power structure that causes them to not share what it is they know.
Yeah, the emperor has no clothes. The public health plan has no justification. No one's pointing it out.
Right. And in fact, this is exactly where we're going to come back to. I will say that in looking into...
I can feel bad for Heather because it really is becoming apparent to me that not only is she relatively shallow-minded, not very bright, but she is fully bamboozled by her scripted husband. She thinks her husband just comes up with these brilliant ideas instead of getting texts from Robert Malone or Kevin McKernan.
BARDA, I was alarmed to see the combination of things over which it has dominion.
So he was alarmed when he Googled BARDA. It has dominion over lots of shit.
BARDA is listed as having responsibility across threats from bioterrorism, chemical attack, biological threats, radiological threats, nuclear threats, in addition to pandemic, flu, and emerging diseases.
Now, what's strange about not knowing where BARDA is or who BARDA is that the head of BARDA was Rick Bright, and Rick Bright is the guy that Robert Malone worked for a long time. And in fact, we've played a video on this stream a few times where Robert Malone is giving a lecture to the WHO about fill and finish technologies for vaccines, and then he hands the mic back to Rick Bright, head of BARDA. It is impossible that this guy is smart but just didn't know about BARDA because it missed it in his research. It is impossible that these people are not scripted actors because otherwise they would be horrified. They would have stopped the live stream right here and been like, we can't do this live stream because we didn't know about BARDA is like saying that we didn't know that RNA couldn't pandemic. It's like saying that we didn't know that intramuscular injection was a dumb idea from the late 1800s. It would be like saying maybe we could put pseudouridine in every vaccine. It would reveal that we were really scripted and had no idea. We weren't doing any work for ourselves, and yet here they are. Because they're scripted, and as actors trust the script, but they're improvising, they feel it's totally okay. Just like Heather thought it was okay in 2022 to say, like JJCouey insists on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. She was scripted, but she was improvising. And that improvising was wrong. And so they took it out of the script. They're still improvising today. And they're improvising so badly and so naively that they don't think that anybody that's listening to them will care that they didn't know what BARDA was, even though that's what Rick Bright did for a living, and that's where Robert Malone contracted for a living, and et cetera, et cetera. Oh yeah, BARDA is responsible for pandemics and shit.
And while one could imagine a rationale for grouping these things, I am troubled because one of the hard-won pieces of information that came from...
But it's chemical warfare and nuclear weapons and also pandemics and flu. I mean, but isn't Charles Rixey an expert in all those things? Isn't that what what are we talking about here? This is scripted bullshit. I didn't know what this was. Oh, we did. And we knew who worked for them. We knew what their role was in the pandemic, and we already knew that it was possible that somewhere under that umbrella was the contractor or paramilitary contractor that was responsible for these scripted clowns, which Whitney Webb and Kim Iverson will refer to nonchalantly as the PayPal Mafia.
Stop lying!
The COVID education that we got was that there is a strange conflation built into the law that brings the preparation for pandemics into very close contact with bioweapons research. That is to say, the dual use exception means that you can study bioweapons. The gain of function research that was done that seems to have created the COVID pandemic was done based on a dual use exemption, which says that as long as you've got a rationale like, oh, we'd better know what's going to happen if a coronavirus leaps out of nature by making one that's capable of infecting and spreading between people. Now, that's a nonsense rationale, but if you can say it and get it believed, then it justifies your bioweapons research.
Yeah.
As an adult on Earth, I cannot urge you enough to understand that it is imperative, if you want to remain a free adult, that you educate yourself enough in basic biology so that you can see plainly how much of a stooge Brett Weinstein is. It is really your responsibility to your children and your grandchildren, if you do nothing else before you die, that you learn enough biology to understand why it is certain beyond any doubt that Brett Weinstein and his wife are scripted stooges. And that a conversation with me that would last more than 15 minutes would reveal them as ridiculous frauds. And there will be an open invitation. In fact, I will spend the last $1,000 that my family has in order to get him on a Zoom meeting with me. His wife, together, I would put up another $1,000 for them to talk to me for even a half an hour and explain how it is that they kind of forgot that we were in a Signal chat. What was really going on in that Signal chat? Why was Chris Martinson? Why was Alexandros Marinos in there? Why did we have a couple drinks over Zoom in 2020? What were you doing to me? What was your connection with Piper Stover? Or more importantly, we could just talk about the biology that they support. They apparently have made themselves experts in over the last 6 years of study. I would love it if somebody like Sherry Tenpenny would come on my stream and defend herself. After 25 years of studying for 18 hours a day, I think I could wipe the floor with her like a mop. Because these people are scripted frauds, and without their script, they're just frauds.
So I also had never heard of BARDA before. I have just begun to look, and I admit that it feels like one of these hidden rabbit warrens of
think about how ridiculous it would be. I never heard of the FDA before. But apparently the FDA has like complete dominion over the label of every product in America, and that the safety and effectivity of every product in America is basically covered by this organization called the FDA. Hey, Brett, have you ever heard of the FDA before? No, I've never heard of it before. At that point, wouldn't you probably not take these shitheads very seriously? Yet, what this reveals is that they have been so scripted for so long that they don't actually realize that not knowing BARDA is the same level of stupid as openly admitting that you didn't know what the FDA was or what it did until August of 2020 frickin' 5. Heather Haying and Brett Weinstein are scripted actors, and in real life, that makes them frauds.
Modern federal American bureaucracy that I might have imagined existed in some form, but given how knowledgeable I and we are about science funding, about how people get their research funded with federal grants, and also with regard to how much we learned during COVID, how much Fauci had been responsible for increasing what are known as public-private partnerships, both at the NIAID and I believe at the NIH more broadly during Fauci's tenure that began in the 80s, which are in one way it sounds...
I got to start her over again because it's so crazy.
Means that you can study bioweapons, the gain-of-function research that was
Wait
done
till you
that
hear it
seems to have
again.
Created the COVID pandemic was done based on a dual-use exemption, which says that as long as you've got...
First of all, remember, he's saying that the pandemic is a lab leak, and he helped figure it out, right? So the Scooby-Doo mystery is definitely here, just like Rand Paul and Massey and all the other ones.
Like, oh, we'd better know what's going to happen if a coronavirus leaps out of nature by making one that's capable of infecting and spreading between people. Now, that's a nonsense rationale, but if you can say it and get it believed, then it justifies your bioweapons research.
Yeah, so I also had never heard of BARDA before. I have just begun to look, and I admit that it feels like one of these hidden rabbit warrens of...
No, it's not a hidden rabbit hole. It is something you should have known about since 2020 when you decided to figure it out. Except you're a scripted actor, and it wasn't in your script, so you don't know about it. If it's not in the script, you don't know about it. It's like you get a script to be a Star Trek, person on Star Trek, and then they say, hey, do you know anything about the Romulans? And it's like, well, I haven't been in a Romulan show yet, so I don't know anything about the Romulans. Who the hell are they? It is exactly like that. And if the next day they say, you know what, can you make this curry in this Instant Pot, and then we need you to go on tomorrow and say that you really like curry, and you think curry is really special, and you think curry is really for smart people, and then you're going to sell this curry product. And she'll do it. But it is really, that Star Trek analogy is perfect. If you were an actor on a Star Trek set, but you weren't a Star Trek fan, yeah? And you weren't a Star Trek fan, but you have all the Star Trek shit and you're on the Star Trek show, it'd be very surprising to a Star Trek fan if they saw you in person and they said, hey, my favorite thing is the Romulans. I can't wait until you guys fight the Romulans. And then you looked at him or her and you said, I don't know who the Romulans are. I just do the character of the guy that you like, but I don't know who the Romulans are. And that fan would be like, oh shit, wow, that's crazy. I thought you must know all about Star Trek because you play a character in the show. But it would make total sense if somebody who was playing in a Star Trek didn't know all the history of all the Star Trek as well as a fan did. But if this person is pretending to be a biologist that sacrificed everything to figure it out during COVID, then you can understand why I might be a little pissed if when I talked to them over the course of the last 5 years, they didn't know anything about anything. And now it's gotten to the point where on an episode of the show, they actually say something as stupid into the camera on the set of the frickin' USS Enterprise. What are Romulans? And of course, what happens then? The director screams, "Cut! What the hell's wrong with you? What kind of improvising is that? If you were going to improvise, at least go with it and say, I don't remember the Romulans, or tell me again about the Romulans." But seriously, what kind of improv is this? It's improv with a very limited shit script. It might even be improv without an update to the script in a very long time. You know, kind of floating aimlessly in a space that they don't belong in. Whatever it is, these people the floor has just dropped out from underneath them with this one ridiculous show.
Of modern federal American bureaucracy that I might have imagined existed in some form, but given how knowledgeable I and we are about science funding, about how
we are so knowledgeable about science funding, given how knowledgeable we are. I mean, given the extraordinary colossus of icebergs sizes of information that we are capable of conveying and also learning during the COVID pandemic.
People get their research funded with federal grants. And also with regard to how much we learned during COVID, how much Fauci had been responsible for increasing what are known as public-private partnerships, both at the NIAID and I believe at the NIH more broadly during Fauci's tenure that began in the 80s, which are in one way it sounds great, right? That the public should be working with private enterprise to help advance problems that humans have. But it puts all of the incentives in this strange place that are hard to untangle. And BARDA appears to be, from what I can see in a quick perusal of their site, in large measure, precisely about, once again, these public-private partnerships.
Can you read it to us? Please tell me you're going to read a little bit of the website that you just Googled, you gigantic shithead.
Public-private partnership.
You know, when Secretary Kennedy says in that clip, we are in the process of canceling 22, contracts, what comes to mind for me is like, well, what does contract mean in this case? Because contract can mean a lot of things. And I can't, maybe it's a matter of public record. I haven't found it yet, nor do I know inherently what a contract means in this case. Are these more akin to research grants that were applied for by a PI and a team at some institution, institution of higher ed, and maybe are collaborating across multiple institutions? Or is it a contract that was formed without without a PI, without a scientist leading the charge out of an institution?
Okay, so this is a short clip. It may be that we'll reach the end of the clip and I'm going to have to pull up another video because there is a part of this video where they discuss the mRNA, and I don't remember if I recorded it as a separate clip or not. So if I do have to do that, I apologize, but we're not done by a long shot yet because this isn't even close to as bad as they went.
Institution where we tend to think of the science as emerging from, but rather from a private company that is now engaged in some sort of harder to track engagement with the federal government.
I think we can infer a certain amount from what Kennedy says here about what these contracts are likely to be. Mm-hmm. My guess would be that there is a boilerplate rationale for the advanced production of a so-called vaccine on the mRNA platform with a particular antigen in mind. So, for example, you can imagine that there is a lot of concern over bird flu right? We hear it already in the press.
Okay, so remarkable, right? We're not going to talk about how they were made, the different ways that they could be made, nothing like that, because I don't think it's ever been in their script, so they don't know. I think the video is going to end in a second. I'll have to escape out.
Sort of being softened up for a terrifying bird flu pandemic. Large flocks of domesticated birds are being destroyed over the threat of bird flu, etc. So you can imagine we have some idea what a bird flu is going to look like, in part because bird flu is not a zoonotic origin disease. It's a disease that moves back and forth using birds because birds are a good dispersal mechanism. But,
so he doesn't know that. That's what he's been told. That's what he learned during the course of the pandemic. He read something and regurgitated it. This is not it's not a deep biological understanding that I'm trying to give you. This is exactly the opposite.
That somebody has justified the production of a so-called vaccine, so when what they consider inevitable, terrifying bird flu pandemic happens, that they can deliver the shot in short order, that they may even have it stockpiled. Do you know that to be?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that's probably some of what's going on. But I find what I see on the site, and you can go ahead and show my screen here if you want, has so many different avenues by which you can get in with BARDA. So it's under the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response.
It's called ASPR, you shithead. She probably didn't even know what that was either.
Exists BARDA, the Biomedical Center for Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. And, they have all these program areas, many of which you mentioned, things like chemical.
I mean, was Kevin McCairn scrolling this website in 2020? I mean, what the... If it wasn't Kevin McCairn, it would have been Addie Ads and Paul Cottrell. Like, this is such a joke.
Biological, radiological, and nuclear, influence, and emerging.
This can't be scripted dumb. This is improvised dumb. This is making an admission that they don't understand. As I said before, this is not the same as being a Star Trek actor and meeting a Star Trek fan and then admitting that, you're yourself and not a Star Trek fan and you can't, talk about what happened with the season 4 and the Romulan attack. Because you weren't in that season and you're not a Star Trek fan and you don't care. You just read your lines because it pays well. That might disappoint the fan of Star Trek, but it would also be understandable to the Star Trek fan. That's not the same thing as what's happening here. This is a person who has been scripted to play a role, understands that she's playing a role, believes that she is leading people to the promised land of understanding, and that she's been doing it with her husband for years. And so she believes that it's okay, that this is part of her showing that she has integrity. But it is equivalent to her saying that, I didn't know what FDA was either, but I'm pretty surprised. I went to their website and boy, they sure have a lot of responsibility. The fact that they are doing this and that Brett is not correcting her or stopping her, that they both admitted freely they didn't know what BARDA was, that they're surprised at how many different things it's responsible for, is an error that was made because they have not been provided an updated script. And they will make more errors as they continue to improvise without the script being updated.
Infectious diseases, et cetera, But if we go up one to partnering with BARDA, I have looked at the BARDA digital resources and doing business with BARDA, and it's hard to parse. And then
she's clicked on a few things on the website, and they're pretty hard to figure out.
Under TechWatch, just because this is the one I was just looking at, request a TechWatch meeting with BARDA and interagency partners. Over a decade of industry engagement seeking submissions, the USG, the U.S. government, seeks information from stakeholders on available medical countermeasures in development. That's big and broad and vague. We are particularly interested in products, technologies, and capabilities that have progressed into or beyond clinical trials, have established large-scale cGMP manufacturing capability. I don't know what cGMP stands for.
How can she say that she doesn't know what cGMP stands for in the context of manufacturing? and call herself an expert who's trying to figure it out. It's not cyclic GMP. You know what's funny is that the exact same acronym was not understood by a guy by the name of Robin Martinati, who used to be the handler on Telegram for Mike Eden. And this Martinati guy, or not Martinati, what did I say his name was? It's not, now I'm saying a word that's not his name. Montanati. Yeah, Montanati. Robin Montanati got into an argument with me about clones. And I was saying that the commercial general manufacturing something, whatever CGMP stands for, is like, it's like general manufacturing processes. It's accepted. So in other words, there's an accepted way to do things and accepted standards. And you have to have a clinical facility with established large-scale ability to follow the standard protocols for manufacturing these products. And then we would like a submission from you. So when I was arguing with Robin Montanati on X all by myself, I said that the standard manufacturing procedure is clones. They make a lot of DNA using bacterial cultures, and that's the standard manufacturing process. And that guy came back to me and said that cyclic GMP has nothing to do with this. You know, the second messenger system and blah, 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 blah. And then he blocked me. And so again, you have another sort of anecdotal example, but they all are everywhere for me, where people don't know what they're talking about. They admit it by trying to dunk on me, but then, falling on their face because, I don't know what BARDA means, but I'm sure you're wrong, Mr. Couey. Or going off script for a second in 2022 and saying, that JJCouey guy who insists that we should not call these vaccines, but we should call them transfection, and then never say it again.
Where they're, or utilize an improved platform, information regarding diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines, and other products, technologies, or capabilities relevant to respond to public health emergencies are sought. It seems like they just threw everything in there, and I don't see.
Imagine after 6 years, they think they're doing their viewers a favor by reading the BARDA website, the organization they'd never heard of, the primary, producer of the pandemic under the ASPR, the organization known as ASPR and HHS. So I'm going to escape out of this and put on the other video because I can see this one's ending, and I just want to get right away to the full video of them doing this shtick because it's really extraordinary.
But it's the tip of the iceberg with respect to why
videos. It should be here. There. So of course it's got this gay beginning, but I'll get rid of that.
Hey folks, welcome to the Dark Horse Podcast.
Right here.
Pointing to, the hardest part of his announcement for me to swallow is that he is pointing to one real problem with the mRNA as the reason for the cancellations, which forces him to ignore the 20 other reasons that the mRNA technology is not the right tool in this instance. So one thing, I think if we drill down on the rationale that he provides, he says mRNA platform vaccines tend to be narrow. They tend to be single antigen. Because they're single antigen, the evolutionary change necessary to escape the immunological advanced warning is small. You take the one antigen that the body has been warned about and you modify it, and suddenly the immune system can't see it anymore. That is definitely true. And as I said before, we talked about this at length during the pandemic. We were looking at these embarrassingly narrow vaccines. How could they possibly control a rapidly evolving virus like this one? They weren't going to, and they didn't. On the other hand,
I'm not sure when he actually said that, but it wasn't very often, and it certainly wasn't with much precision.
I do think it is important for us to understand why an mRNA vaccine.
If I made $25,000 a month with this stream, I would have a billboard in at least 4 different directions around Pittsburgh telling the truth and advertising for my work. I would also be fully funding Housatonic's website, and I would also be funding his own peer tube that I would connect to. If I had $25,000 a month, there's all kinds of shit I would do with it, and it wouldn't be buying a house on an island. Damn it, I hate these people.
Is narrowly targeted. And the answer is that this is actually in some ways built in to the platform itself, because what you are doing, I mean, I get in trouble every time I say that the platform is brilliant. It is brilliant. It solves a problem that is very difficult to solve in gene therapies. It does so in a way that I don't think it can be safely deployed in humans. It would need a targeting mechanism. But what it does is it allows cells to make things.
It would need a targeting mechanism. Think about that. Think about it. He's saying that it could work, just like they all say it could work with the right technology.
That those cells themselves do not know how to make. And you can imagine, let's say that you had a disease, and there are diseases like this, where you have a genetic defect that was present in the zygote from which you came, in which you fail to produce some protein that is necessary for
like
proper
Jesse
health.
Gelsinger.
And that's a devastating problem. Now, sometimes we can feed you that protein and you can pull it in and use it, but in general, it's very hard to get the body to correctly utilize some extrinsic product. So if you could get the cells, if you could teach them to make a product that they don't know how to make themselves, you can solve a lot of things in principle. But if you're trying to get cells to become vaccine factories,
right, that's true.
The whole
good point.
Of
they need a targeting mechanism, but at the start of the pandemic, Robert Malone says he took 2 shots of Moderna because Peter Cullis, the inventor of the new lipid nanoparticle, had assured him that they had fixed the problem of the lipid nanoparticle going everywhere.
Stop lying!
And so now, of course, it's okay if Brett Weinstein's script after 6 years gets updated to say, yeah, it would have been great if we would have had some kind of mechanism to target it in places like exosomes have.
In something designed to get inside the cell and, drop a message onto a ribosome. So you are
It's too much. It's too big.
Right. It's like, trying to transmit literature through a tweet. It's not the right mode to do literature. It's the right mode for a sentence. And so it's not a great platform for a vaccine because it will inherently be narrow, which is inherently vulnerable to viral evolution.
Maybe this isn't necessary, but can we just step back a moment and say cells can be analogized to many things in human understanding. And one of those things is factory. Like cells are not only factories. They don't only act as factories, but they do act as producers of things that are then going to be necessary not only for those cells, but for other parts of the body. And what the mRNA platform is allowing, it has facilitated, is, you cells are, one of the many things that you are factories. And yet the things that you make don't include the thing that we want you to make. And we have figured out a way to onload instructions for this thing so that you can make this thing as well. It's not that the claim is that cells are only factories and now they're doing something entirely different, or that they can't continue to do what they would otherwise be doing. But the limitation is, well, it's not the only thing they do, and you can't possibly have them create entire viral genomes. And so you cross-load, I don't know what the right analogy here would be, but you give instructions to your cells in their capacity as factory to make a tiny little piece of the virus in question.
Yeah, I mean, really, anybody that's watching this right now that had any doubt about them or any clue that they were scripted fools now has to be kind of terrified, because they trapped a lot of people for 5 years with this same shtick that now is only really visible because of our work, only really visible because of Mark Kulak's work. Nobody else has helped us see that actually there was this mystery to solve about the cover-up of a lab leak, and that all the vigor around that was as stupid as it could get. And that vigor is being sustained to this day, 6 years later, by the same shitheads who were scripted to it in the first place. And anybody that could see through it and fought through it is gone. And I'm going to make the argument that Mark and really me are the only people that are left. And I don't know, Mark didn't have the experience that I have. Mark never got hired by RFK. Mark never got a phone call from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Ron Johnson on the same day. Mark never got invited to be on a stream with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and Tess Laurie and Jessica Rose. Mark never got invited to be on a stream with Stephanie Seneff and Kevin McKernan and John Bodwin and Jessica Rose. I mean, Mark never got a stream dedicated to him with Andy Kaufman and Tom Cowan and Christine Massey and Alex Zeck and Mark Bailey. Mark was never streaming with 5 people all the time in the beginning of the pandemic like I was with Kevin McCairn and Paul Cottrell and Addie Ads, 3 guys associated with George Webb, the guy who was on 60 Minutes in February of 2020 saying it was a military games leak. And that people on 60 Minutes and Robert Malone, former BARDA employee and DITRA employee and DOD employee, was willing to say his name and give you a link to the frickin' CBS broadcast of the 60 Minutes thing. It's because it's all one scripted show with scripted actors that they call on each other and reference each other, and that's why he said Gerrit van den Bosch's name in this little diatribe and not mine. Even though he was in a Signal chat with me for almost a year trying to get me to believe that I didn't understand anything and that Gerrit van den Bosch is somebody I should trust. That Matt Crawford's somebody I should trust, or Alexandros Marinos, or Chris Martenson. These are all absolutely, positively deep state scripted actors. That's how we are being governed by podcast. And you can see that they're naive because they actually have no depth of understanding at all. It's going to get worse.
And in fact, this goes to another thing that we talked about during the pandemic, which I don't think has been highlighted enough. In effect, an mRNA vaccine is a pseudovirus, right? But it is a pseudovirus in the same sense that, that a toy car, the same relationship that a wind-up car has to a car, right? Is it technically a car? Maybe, but the point is it's a crude rendering of something that we have highly refined, much more capable renderings of. A virus is the product of many millions of years of refinement to deploy a precise strategy. In general, a virus has the incentive of only infecting those tissues that are useful to it in making more virus and spreading it to other individuals. So that's bad for you. It makes you sick. But they don't have an incentive to invade every cell in the body because they can't spread from most of the cells in the body to anybody else. So the point is they actually want to leave you alive so you do their bidding. And so they spare most of the body and they only infect certain tissues, right? Part of why your lungs are so vulnerable. It's a great place to spread to other places from. You get in the lungs, you spread from the lungs. There's no reason to invade lots of other tissues. So in the case of these mRNA so-called vaccines, they behave like a virus. They get into the body, they can get into a cell, and they can cause the cell to do the bidding of the engineer. The problem is the mRNA platform vaccines have no targeting mechanism. They circulate and they invade any cell they touch. There's, a virus is elegantly built to look for a particular receptor in many cases, and that receptor is what it allows it to get into the cell. So it's looking for a particular subclass of cells because historically that's what got it to where it is evolutionarily. mRNA vaccines have no such targeting. They invade cells randomly, and unlike a true virus, which causes its entire genome to be duplicated and then new viral coats to be made and then spilled out into the cytoplasm or into the interstitial spaces, this basically creates a protein as if the cell itself meant to create the protein, and then it makes a fatal error. It exports that protein to its surface, which then causes the immune system to see it, and regarding the cell as virally infected, which in some sense it is, the immune system destroys it.
Virus fragment producing cells become targeted by the very immune system that we're trying to activate and get destroyed.
Right, and that is both the intended mechanism, that is what causes the immune system to start realizing that that particular sequence is meaningful, for it to learn the code, but it also causes the body to destroy its own tissues. It's the built-in major flaw of this platform, is it causes destruction of cells in the process of teaching the immune system anything.
And so now I just want to clear this up, because I think it's really, it's an opportunity here. Let me move my antique needles. I think it's really important to show exactly how shitty these people are. I mean, they are the worst kinds of frauds that could exist on Earth right now. I don't think there is a worse pair of frauds on Earth. And what makes them only worth a little pity is because you can hear plain as day that they trust their script, and they believe their script provider would not put them out, this far, but they are very, very far out. So here's a couple things to know. When a cell is making protein, and it doesn't matter what the protein is, when a cell is making protein, then it's also presenting a part of that protein on a molecule called MHC. Now I'm using a very simplified diagram. The star is the protein, and then a part of the protein is up here. That's the star part. But there might be a circle and a square and a circle and a diamond, like that. And so you're only gonna present a fragment of the protein, but most importantly, it's a fragment of the protein that your own body knows is okay. And so you have these cytotoxic T cells that are rolling around. And those cytotoxic T cells are actually interacting with this receptor and a couple other receptors. And also NK cells, natural killer cells, also do this. They interact with this receptor. And it's pretty complicated, but the accepted mechanism is that if this cell has the right stop signal over here, and what it's presenting doesn't, have any problems with this, what it reads here, then this cell and this cell will ignore this cell. But a cancerous cell would be expressing a protein here that might be a self protein, but it's not supposed to be expressing it because it's not supposed to be dividing. And so cancer is detected by a complex interaction between the cancerous tissue and the immune system, trying to decide whether what is being reported as happening inside of the cell is okay or not. In the context of the transfection, what you have is the production of a protein, but the protein is foreign, right? And so we're not going to recognize this, and the protein will be presented here. And maybe what will be presented is PRO, right? Because it's the protein. It's not going to present the star because it's a foreign protein. And so it's going to present PRO. And more importantly, the protein itself is going to be expressed on the outside, right? Like this. And there's going to be protein on the outside, and MHC is going to be presenting that. Now remember, that's different than this. In a healthy cell, the fragments that are presented here are the fragments of maintenance. Whatever that cell has to make in order to maintain itself. And if it's not making very many things, then there won't be very much presentation. If there's not very much presentation, then there's not very much for the immune system to worry about. But the more shit that's going on inside the cell, then the more stuff will be presented on the outside so that the immune system can double check that everything that's going on here is kosher. When you transfect a cell, that's not what happens. The cell starts reporting, and it reports a lot because it's transfected with something that it's not it's producing a lot of this protein. If it's pseudouridine modified mRNA transcripts, it might produce an incredible amount of that protein. So it might present a lot of it. Plus, it's going to have that protein on the outside. So after the first transfection, the primary way that the cells will be destroyed is by cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells recognizing that this protein is not natural. It's not endogenous, and so they will kill this cell. Right? But when they kill this cell, the cell needs to be cleaned up, and it's during the cleanup process that the immune system will try to decide, what did they just clean up? Is there any foreign stuff here? Is there any signal here that we should present to our other immune cells? And so there's a chance that it might present this protein, but there's also a chance that it might present an endogenous protein in the process of attacking endogenous tissue. Now, there are molecular mechanisms inside of the endothelium, all of your barriers, that figure this self-destruction in. And in places in your body where self-destruction doesn't occur a lot, where you don't just, spontaneously slough skin cells off or spontaneously slough the mucosal layer of your epithelium in your gut, but you maintain it like in muscles, then this process is very detrimental. It's destroying something that's not ready to be replaced like it is in an epithelial layer. And so this destruction, by definition, doesn't have the same level of presentation. It doesn't have the same level of specificity that would occur if there was something like this occurring in an immune barrier like an epithelium. And so there's two things different here. Number one, there's no foreign protein on the outside of a cell when it's just reporting what it's making in the natural state. But in a transfected state, there is a terrible signal on MHC. This is MHC, or HLA receptors in humans, but in all other animals, they just call it major histocompatibility complex. And there's one and there's two, but we won't get into that for now. But these guys use number 2 and this uses number 1. And then they interact like this. So number 2 is on the immune system. And number 2 is also how the antigen presenting cells present, as far as I remember. So anyway, the point is that on the second transfection, there will be a second signal here, and that signal will be the antibody. And if antibodies are binding to the expressed protein, then you can also have a cytotoxic T cell response or a natural killer cell response to the binding of the antibodies here. And these will produce two different immune results, depending on whether it's a cytotoxic T apoptosis or whether it is its cytotoxic effects due to the deposition of antibodies and complement. Now, this is just me shooting off the cuff here after 6 years of intense study and 6 years of trying to find somebody on the dissident movement who could, help me understand this better. And Brett Weinstein is one of those people who is scripted not to help you understand it better. And that's why my explanation off the cuff with pencil on a piece of paper is so much more spectacularly on point than what these dipshitters are saying right now. It is spectacular how much better I am at them than this. It must be that they are frauds. It cannot be any other way.
Attenuated virus vaccine has the same flaw because it causes the body to attack cells. But the point is, again, there you're dealing with a real virus that has a limited set of cells that it targets. And so you can make an attenuated virus vaccine that does a small enough amount of damage to the body that it's worth it from the point of view of the immunity that you get. So Kennedy does talk about the narrow targeting and therefore the fact that this has an unintended evolutionary consequence that may prolong the particular epidemic in question, but he doesn't talk about the fact that actually the platform itself causes the immune system to destroy your own tissues and that can be in any tissue that is perfused with blood, right? That's a major flaw. That's a reason to cancel those contracts too. Likewise, the pseudouridine enrichment of these transcripts that causes these transcripts to last for many, many months, which of course we were lied to and told, the mRNA that in the vaccines is, going to last, hours to days. It's not a big threat. And the answer is no. Months later, this stuff is still circulating and causing the body to produce these antigens, whether or not pandemic is.
All of this is data that we wouldn't have had we not rolled out transfections in humans in 2021. We wouldn't have any data on how long pseudouridine lasts, how long proteins could be produced, how many placebos we have to roll out in order to make the injuries go down into the noise. We didn't know any of this until we rolled it out in 2020. It's all part of the standard operating procedure of converting us to experimental animal status. You can't learn anything about human genetic biology using other genetic organisms, not even monkeys. That's the real reality that academic science has shown us since the beginning of the Human Genome Project, the announcement of its completion over and over and over again. The only real announcement is that we can't learn anything useful about our own genetics by studying the genetics of other, even very closely related mammals.
It's over. You can't turn them off.
It occurs to me that pseudouridine enrichment, which of course earned its creators the Nobel Prize, could actually equally well be applied to more standard vaccines and thus render them more dangerous than they are. And the flip side, the way that will be promoted is they could be longer lasting in the body. You wouldn't need to get vaccinated so frequently. But if we start getting traditional platform vaccines with pseudouridine replacement, then we could have some of the same issues. Do you see an issue with that not being possible?
I don't think you can.
Look how red he turns. This is the admission that he has been scripted. His wife is not, and every once in a while she says some pretty dumb shit. Like that guy JJCouey and how he doesn't think we should call these vaccines, we should call them transfections. She says some really dumb shit like, this just occurs to me that, we could probably put pseudouridine in all the vaccines and we could make all of them last longer. Holy shit, are you dumb? Because she's so dumb, she doesn't understand how dumb that is. How many other vaccines are based in RNA? How would you change a live attenuated virus to a pseudouridine enriched attenuated virus? What in the absolute Sam hell is she talking about? Other than freely admitting as she improvises off script that she doesn't know really anything about vaccination, anything about medicine, anything about molecular biology. Holy living shit!
Do it. In fact, I think one of the reasons that the adenovector DNA version of the vaccine was less dangerous was that it couldn't be pseudouridine enriched. So I don't see a way it could be done.
How was it?
Vaccine. It really has to be.
He says that the adenovirus vaccine was less dangerous. It got pulled off the market. The adenovirus vaccine was less dangerous, but it got pulled off the market. It might have been less dangerous because it couldn't have pseudouridine in it. Because DNA doesn't have it doesn't use uracil. Like, this is so colossally retarded. Capital R retarded. This is chemtrail retarded right here. I mean, these are really stooges. And if they allowed me to have a live stream with them just covering this part of their latest work, I could eviscerate them like a small perch. Like, it is sad. This is just absolutely heartbreaking. Because I'm not even competing against people who are smart liars. I'm competing against people who are scripted idiots. And because they are insulated from knowing that I exist and knowing this truth, that they are able to function. They are exactly the opposite of what I am in social media. A guy who understands but can't get it out. These are people who pretend to understand and are facilitated to getting it out. Holy balls, can you see it?
Be done at the mRNA transcript.
I mean, DNA doesn't have uracil.
Right. But I don't,
Ooh,
I don't
she's
see how
smart.
a standard vaccine could have it, though I don't know that there aren't other technologies that would be used to stabilize it and cause the same thing. But nonetheless, there are so many different design flaws.
He is moving on.
It really does call into...
He is moving on because he cannot correct that error. There is no way to pull out of that nosedive where she said we could just put pseudouridine in everything. Holy shit, honey, you're so dumb that we just got to move on. Like, no, honey, shut up. Please don't. Watch carefully.
Enough. In effect, an mRNA vaccine is a pseudovirus, right?
Yep.
But it is a pseudovirus in the same sense that, that a toy car, the same relationship that a wind-up car has to a car, right? It's is it technically a car? Maybe, but the point is, it's a crude rendering of something that we have highly refined, much more capable renderings of. A virus is the product of many millions of years of refinement to deploy a precise strategy. In general, a virus has the incentive of only infecting those tissues that are useful to it in making more virus and spreading it to other individuals. So that's bad for you. It makes you sick. But they don't have an incentive to invade every cell in the body because they can't spread from most of the cells in the body to anybody else. So the point is they actually want to leave you alive so you do their bidding. Mm-hmm. And so they spare most of the body and they only infect certain tissues, right? It's part of why your lungs are so vulnerable. It's a great place to spread to other places from. You get in the lungs, you spread from the lungs. There's no reason to invade lots of other tissues. So in the case of these mRNA so-called vaccines, they behave like a virus. They get into the body, they can get into a cell, and they can cause the cell to do the bidding of the engineer. The problem is the mRNA platform vaccines have no targeting mechanism. They circulate and they invade any cell they touch. There's, a virus is elegantly built to look for a particular receptor in many cases, and that receptor is what it allows it to get into the cell. So it's looking for a particular subclass of cells because historically that's what got it to where.
Do you know what else I see here? This is Brett being encouraged to take his hands off the table. These motions that he's doing, they don't mean anything. I'm going to go back a few seconds so that you can see how his hand signals, they don't mean shit. They're not helping him express himself at all. And they're not spontaneous. They're forced, like this. They're forcing it, and it doesn't mean anything. He's not trying to pull apart anything. He's not trying to illustrate. He's not telling you how all these things line up like this. It's not. It's fake hand movements.
It is virus. They get into the body, they can get into a cell, and they can cause the cell to do the bidding of the engineer. The problem is the mRNA platform vaccines have no targeting mechanism. They circulate and they invade any cell they touch. There's, a virus is elegantly built to look for a particular receptor in many cases, and that receptor is what it allows it to get into the cell. So it's looking for a particular subclass of cells because historically that's what got it to where it is.
Is that what a particular subclass? Is that how you signal particular? Because that's how it got, and this and that.
Evolutionarily. mRNA vaccines have no such targeting. They invade cells randomly, and unlike a true virus, which causes its entire genome to be duplicated and then new viral coats to be made and then spilled out into the cytoplasm or into the interstitial spaces, this basically creates a protein as if the cell itself meant to create the protein, and then it makes a fatal error. It exports that protein to its surface, which then causes the immune system to see it, and regarding the cell as virally infected, which in some sense it is, the immune system destroys it.
Virus fragment producing cells become targeted by the very immune system that we're trying to activate and get destroyed.
Right. And that is both the intended mechanism, that is what causes the immune system to start realizing that that particular sequence is meaningful, for it to learn the code, but it also causes the body to destroy its own tissues. It's the built-in major flaw of this platform, is it causes destruction of cells in the process of teaching the immune system anything. And you might say that a attenuated virus vaccine has the same flaw because it causes the body to attack cells. But the point is, again, there you're dealing with a real virus that has a limited set of cells that it targets. And so you can make an attenuated virus vaccine that does a small enough amount of damage to the body that it's worth it from the point of view of the immunity that you get. So Kennedy does talk about the narrow targeting, and therefore the fact that this has an unintended evolutionary consequence that may prolong the particular epidemic in question, but he doesn't talk about the fact that actually the platform itself causes the immune system to destroy your own tissues, and that can be in any tissue that is perfused with blood, right? That's a major flaw. That's a reason to cancel those contracts too. Likewise, the pseudouridine enrichment of these transcripts.
Watch Brett's face as Heather goes improvising.
Lied to and told, the mRNA that in the vaccines is, going to last, hours to days. It's not a big threat. And the answer is no. Months later, this stuff is still circulating and causing the body to produce these antigens, whether or not the pandemic is over. You can't turn them off.
It occurs to me that pseudouridine enrichment, which of course earned its creators the Nobel Prize, could actually equally well be applied to more standard vaccines and thus render them more dangerous than they are. And the flip side, the way that will be promoted is they could be longer lasting in the body. You wouldn't need to get vaccinated so frequently. But if we start getting traditional platform vaccines with pseudouridine replacement.
Don't you know the signal is me putting my hand on my chin and looking down at the beetle? When I do that, you're supposed to shut up, honey.
Then we could have the same. Some of the same issues. Do you see an issue with that?
Now he wiped his pants. So I guess wiping his hands on his pants is actually indicating that he sees an issue. So she asks him.
Possible?
I don't think you can.
Yeah, you're kind of a dumbass because that doesn't make any sense at all. And you shouldn't have said that because that reveals you don't know jack shit about diddly. I'm going to try and pull us out of this nosedive by talking about adenovirus. And then I'm also going to crash and burn because I'm going to say the adenovirus might have been safer because it didn't have the pseudouridine.
In fact, I think one of the reasons that the adenovector DNA version of the vaccine was less dangerous was that it couldn't be pseudouridine enriched. So I don't see a way it could be done to a standard vaccine. It really has to be done in the
she's going to argue
transcript.
I mean, DNA doesn't have uracil.
Right.
Ooh, she's smart.
I don't see how a standard vaccine could have it, though I don't know that there aren't other technologies that would be used to stabilize it and cause the same thing.
Oh, she's so confused. Wow. I thought I had something very smart there. I'm a little disappointed that my husband kind of took me down a peg, but at least I was able to recover with DNA doesn't have uracil.
There are so many different design flaws in this platform that it really does call into question what happened. And this is sort of the point I wanted to get to is longtime Dark Horse viewers will remember when you called our attention to the what seemed to be the rationale for the attack that we had seen on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and other alternative therapies, which in the end turn out to be very effective at fending off COVID. In the case of ivermectin and probably hydroxychloroquine, effective at preventing people from contracting COVID.
So hydroxychloroquine, but for sure ivermectin could prevent people from contracting COVID. And he got that right very early in his June 21 podcast with Robert Malone and Steve Kirsch. And apparently he still believes that he was right to this day, 5 years later, because He's a scripted actor.
I know that lots of people aren't up to speed on that being true. They may think that that was disproven. It was not. But nonetheless, you have these broadly effective, out-of-patent drugs that work across RNA viruses that, of course, also worked on SARS-CoV-2. And we had this strange attack. And at the time, you know, all but the most cynical people felt this was strange, because why would you take any tool that was effective in any way at fighting this virus and take it off the table? It seems that maybe you want your vaccine deployed, but you'd like anything at all that was useful in fending off SARS-CoV-2 to be deployed in concert. And it turned out that deployed attacks reserved for safe technologies, comparatively safe technologies, that were effective against the virus in question. That was mysterious. And you pointed out,
it is incredibly brutal, but it's also very easy to see how hard they're working here. They are sticking tightly to a script. It's written down. They are worried about getting off of it. He was worried about how far off she went a few minutes ago, and now he's brought it back in, but he's about to hand it off to her, and he doesn't want her to screw it up again.
That there was a reason for this, which was that in order for the EUA, the emergency use authorization, to be granted for the so-called vaccines, there had to be no viable alternative therapy available. So
That's right.
They were demonized. And I was originally, first of all, I don't know if you were the absolute originator of that idea.
Well, I wanted to say that I, let's see, we talked about that in May of 2021 is when we discussed it, and we'll link that in our show notes.
So 1 month before Robert Malone came on, they discussed that. So the script was a little bit earlier. Then I guess they decided they had to have Robert Malone on. Otherwise it wasn't going to work or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to really hear it right now. All I know for sure is that these people are absolutely, positively, 100% on a script, and they don't even know. I mean, they really don't even know.
John Cullen had, just before I did, but I was not aware of his work, pointed exactly this out as well. So,
holy cow, John Cullen also pointed it out, and she actually says his name. John Cullen. Holy shit.
It was like,
don't forget that John Cullen was also on his stream for like 3 hours to talk about how many shooters were at the Butler, Pennsylvania event where, you know, some classmate or schoolmate of my son shot the president or shot at him or something like that.
Nearly simultaneously, although he put something out into the world like days before we talked about it, people were beginning to put exactly this together. That,
wow.
To get an emergency use authorization for a, in this case.
So she gives credit to John Cullen for figuring out in May of 2021, holy shit, that the reason why they came out against ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine is so that they could get the EUAs out.
A vaccine, there needed to be no alternative treatment. Therefore, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine could not be allowed to work, because if they did, the EUAs for the vaccines would not have been granted.
Now, I was initially quite compelled by this explanation, and I became less compelled over time. I think it contributed, but in the end, the control that the pharmaceutical industry has over the regulatory apparatus, I think, was sufficient to overcome that obstacle. So I don't think it's reason for the attack we saw, but I don't, you know, it obviously pushes in the same direction. What I ultimately concluded is that what was necessary was that the public have no cognitive escape from the need for a vaccine, which is to say, we needed to be overly afraid of the virus. We needed to be led to imagine we were in greater danger.
And so how would they do that? Maybe they would put somebody like, I don't know, the son of Les Weinstein, set him up as a podcaster, and then script him to talk about wearing a bandana and woodshop goggles at the store to feel comfortable. Script him to say that they're not going to go see their family for the holidays because they're taking this seriously. Script them to say that maybe this is a lab leak and here's a guy from Russia and Canada who's going to tell us that it's a lab leak. Script them to say that the fear and cleavage site is curious. Script them to say all the shit that would make people think the worst case scenario was possible, including a lab leak of a designer virus. But they didn't do it. Steve Kirsch wasn't involved. CHD wasn't involved. The anti-vax movement wasn't involved. Andrew Wakefield and Polly Tommy weren't put in place to achieve anything like that. That would be crazy. Those are all spontaneous problems that we're just trying to manage in the background. Holy shit. They are very desperate, ladies and gentlemen, that they are allowing Brett Weinstein to be the guy who gets to claim that he was an exception to the rule, when in fact his frickin' Twitter profile picture was him in woodshop goggles and a fucking bandana.
We needed to be locked down so that we were suffering from this virus that was out of control.
And then they put Mr. Jordan Peterson online to say that I don't know anything about pandemics, but I'm doing everything they tell me to do. I'm wearing the masks, and my best advice is to just take the shot so we can get it over with, because maybe if we fight infectious disease, we'll also be able to simultaneously eliminate the whole idea of totalitarianism. I don't know, though. I don't have any insight. Fuck me.
So that we would experience the release of the vaccine as hopeful, necessary, and we would do our part and we would go get vaccinated. And if you rerun the pandemic in your mind and you think, well, what if hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, doxycycline, all of the other things that worked had been allowed to be deployed by the doctors who innovated these protocols and allowed to compete? Well, what would have happened is lots of people would have said, hey, wait a minute. I don't know about this new vaccine technology. That sounds kind of scary. Here are some doctors who seem to be having very good results with these alternatives. I think I'll go that way. And the point is, for some reason, that was not going to be allowed, even if it meant...
But that's exactly what happened. He's trying to pretend that there was an effective stopping of the use of ivermectin, but ivermectin is on sale and every ad on Rumble right now. So I don't understand what is happening here, except a scripted lie is being told about an effective campaign to censor the knowledge that these gifted and creative doctors came up with, that allowed the EUAs to go through. But instead, what really actually happened was the debate, the question, and the rumors, and the discussion about whether the ivermectin I got is real or not. Should I get it from Mexico or not? Maybe I should get it from China. That all happened by design, and now he's telling you that it didn't happen, that they censored it and nobody was using ivermectin, and I couldn't get my word out because they demonetized my channel and canceled my YouTube. But that's not what happened. The canceling of his channel, the publicizing of his cancellation, the publicizing of his story and Malone's on Tucker Carlson, the publicizing of the LinkedIn censorship got the word out and made what he just said they prevented from happening happen, which is widespread use of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine under the pretense that it could protect you against something novel that just recently showed up on Earth. And these people are absolutely positively reinforcing the novel something that showed up on Earth and the usefulness of these recycled drugs on that novel something. And they're trying to tell you that the censorship campaign was so effective that lots of people took the mRNA.
Stop lying!
Lots of people were going to die for lack of these other drugs. We needed to be left in a position where the only hope that was given to the public was the vaccines.
No. That's the SPARS pandemic document brochure version. The real military fifth generation warfare version is that they put scripted people on the internet to ask the wrong questions and make sure that anybody that was skeptical would be taking ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine Anyone that was skeptical would be doing stupid things that to their family members and other people on the other side would be obviously stupid. It's an ant poison. It's a insecticide. And that's why he's on ivermectin and not hydroxychloroquine, probably because hydroxychloroquine might be useful in a pneumonia.
Well, and now we're in the territory of Matthias Desmet with the psychology of totalitarianism, in which he pointed out many of exactly these techniques that were in play during COVID and in previous moments in 20th century history as well.
Exactly. So the question is, was this a psychological operation? And disturbingly, if this was a psychological operation designed to give us a savior, which was this new vaccine platform,
as opposed to giving us a savior in the form of a health freedom movement. And here is where the script that they've been given reveals them for the absolute shitheads that they are. Because this script is written so poorly that I can dissect it so easily. Listen carefully to how stupid it is what he just said.
And no alternative.
20th century history as well, in which...
Exactly. So the question is, was this a psychological operation? And disturbingly, if this was a psychological operation designed to give us a savior, which was this new vaccine platform, and no alternative...
It was to give us a savior in Donald Trump, a savior in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a savior in Jimmy Dore, a savior in Brian Hooker and CHD and Polly Tommy and Andrew Wakefield, that after so much commitment, 25 years, 18 hours a day, they're finally scoring the touchdown that they meant to score all a long time ago.
Stop lying!
The savior was not the mRNA vaccine. That's the baby, stupid version of a military control exercise where everybody on all sides of the trap doesn't know shit, including the actors. That's the only way it works. Brett Weinstein and Heather Hang are absolute buffoons. They are frauds, but not frauds in the bad way. Not frauds in the like they should know better. They are frauds in the incompetent, ignorant, jackassery sort of way that a first-year medical student might be, or that a new undergraduate might be, or that maybe a freshman in high school might be in an AP biology class with sophomores. Like, this is pathetic. And the reason why it is sustainable is because they are as sheltered by the programming of the internet from the mirror it should be that I am sheltered from the internet for the outlet it should be for me. In other words, I was misled into thinking that if I said the right things and tweeted enough that somebody would hear me, in the same way that these people have been misled into thinking that they had accomplished that. That despite the censorship, they have risen to being leaders. And I believe with all of my heart that both Brett and Heather are actually believing that. And that because they are scripted, they say stupid shit. And that stupid shit has gone to a new level of dumb because their script hasn't been updated in so long, and because they are actually not the intellectuals they are pretending to be. Just like if you took a cast member of a Star Trek show and you didn't give him the cast script anymore, it would be hard for them to improvise on set. And they might sound pretty dumb. It's really what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen. These are actors. They are actors on a stage, and they are so dumb, and so, not even dumb. They are so part of the show that they are unaware that the crowd is fake, that the cheering is fake. They're like a comedian And this is great. They're like a comedian in a nightclub and they can't see the audience. And if the lights were to come on, they would find out that there's no audience at all, but just a bunch of chairs with speakers. And that all their followers and all their Substack subscribers and all their locals subscribers and all the people that send them questions, the vast majority of them are fake. Scripted. Part of the illusion that sustains them, that makes them safe state narrative actors because they actually don't know. And any mistake they can make can be blown off because they're idiots to begin with. They're never going to get permanently off script like somebody with real expertise like Tony Barkwood. They're never going to get really off script like somebody with real expertise that they earned with study like Brandy Vaughn would. And they're never going to get me off of script like they could Brett Weinstein, because I actually did the work to learn that RNA can't pandemic, that intramuscular injection's a dumb idea from the late 1800s. And I did a whole career using transfection, so I knew they were lying about it from the beginning.
But you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar. But you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
I'm going to do my best to put together a show for you for Friday. I won't make any hard promises, but I am going to work hard to make sure that I can be online again tomorrow. It is absolutely unbelievable to have my family back. And so it's just going to take me a little while to get back into that different groove. But I assure you, having the love of my life and my best friend back in the house is kick-ass. And having my sons, my basketball buddies back in the house is kick-ass. And having my absolutely sweet, wonderful, intelligent, funny daughter back in the house is just, it's incredible. So thanks for helping me get through July. And thanks for being here in August, and thanks for believing enough to stick with me, all 98 of you. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. Don't worry. I'm not going to stop.